You're tuned in to the HR Bandit podcast, your one-way ticket to the latest and craziest in the world of work. In partnership with Timber Media, Podcaster for India Inc. is sponsored by Adrenaline E-Systems Limited.
Welcome to the first ever show of HR Bandit. This is your host, Ankita. I work with Amazon as a senior HR business partner based out of Dublin in Ireland. But that's my day job. When not at my day job, I enjoy interacting with HR enthusiasts across the world, which brought me in touch with NHRDN. A big shout out to the new workplace stream of NHRDN Hyderabad and Rajata for sponsoring this podcast and allowing me to create it. What is HR Bandit? HR Bandit is a show where we talk about real-world happenings and the impact on work. We'll discuss papers, bring in a new guest every month, share our opinions, and just some unedited banter, mostly. I am now super excited to introduce you to our first guest on the show, Mr. Shahid Khan. Shahid was my first ever manager in the world of HR. He has over 20 years of work experience with brands like Wipro, Deloitte, GE, and ITC Infotech, where he was my manager. Shahid now mentors startups and has a newfound love of farming. We've spoken often, and he has introduced me to a whole bunch of new terms. He has this panache of saying, here's a quiz for you. And one of those questions was, have you heard of virtual walks? With that, Shahid, I'm going to stop my long ramble. Welcome to the show. And where was your virtual walk to today?
Hey, hi, Ankita. Always good to talk to you. And a big hello to everybody who's tuned in. Ankita and I have enjoyed having conversations on HR, whatever intrigues us. So hopefully today's conversation is going to leave you with something to ponder about. But back to virtual walks, I personally think this has been one of the best inventions of the pandemic era. Just a backdrop, it's basically a virtual walk of an area through Zoom by a local historian. So my last virtual walk was in an area called Bandra, which is a suburb of Bombay where I'm based. And this is an area where I have been born and I've grown up there. So I really know it very well. But this walk really left me completely refreshed and educated about my area because we went through the history of the last 200-300 years of Bandra, where things came from. So the things that I've passed a million times, I really didn't know where they came from. And I think it's something that got me thinking of what's the connection between the past and today. So I'd highly recommend virtual walks. I'm quite sure they're happening in other parts of India, in Hyderabad and Chennai and Bangalore. So I think if you can look out for it, I think it'll leave you very enriched and reach out and I can help you with finding a virtual walk.
Yeah, but I think between the whole camp of virtual walk and fake commutes, I am strongly in the whole fake commute party. I would take a real walk. I know it's much harder there these days, but I spend so much time in front of the screen that I would literally do anything to not be in front of a screen anymore.
No, I think there are no two ways about it. That the real thing is always brilliant, but I think we just got to find some creative outlets in these times. So, but yeah, we shall do real walks as number one.
Soon, yes.
Soon.
And actually, that brings me to our first topic of the show today. Stanford recently published its first ever study on the infamous Zoom fatigue. I know Harvard did a little bit last year where it said, we are working longer hours, but this study is groundbreaking in the fact that it's easy to process. And it kind of verifies everything that we've already been talking about, but there was no data. Now we have like the Stanford stamp in front of it. And you and I have discussed this a fair bit, Shahid. So what's your favorite part about this study?
So I agree with you. I think compared to many other academic literature, it was definitely much more easy to digest. And I think all of you who do go through it at some point, I think we all will have an aha moment and saying, oh yeah, I have been feeling that too. But let me just go back a few steps to what the researchers had laid out as the foundation for their research. So they had started to look at what's the basics of our human behavior. So they had looked at what are some of our very basic human instincts, and how does our body wired to react in certain situations. Now, this has been true for generations and thousands of years. And then you put this whole new animal called Zoom in front of us, which we've been all staring at the screens for so long. What happens when our native behavior meets this latest technology? And that's what is fascinating. So to my favorite part, it was to do with eyeballs and eye contact. So let's just look at what our native selves are. Now, I think we've all kind of stood up and addressed meetings, gone up on stage, and we've all felt some jibbers, our body tensing up, etc. And what we don't realize is that in our neural network, we are wired that our body senses whenever we're being looked at. So whenever the body senses many people are looking at you, it tenses up and looks at it as an intense situation. So you get primed up and hopefully you give your best. But what does it do in the Zoom scenario? So if eyeballs and eye contact makes us feel a bit more tense, in the Zoom situation where there is also the speaker and the listener, what the research says, and something that when I read it, I said like, yeah, that's so true, that listeners also continue to look at other listeners. So probably raise your hands for if you've been guilty of, when attending a Zoom meeting, of looking at other windows of other participants and saying, how are they dressed? Or what's her hair like? What's the backdrop? Which painting does she have? So we are only not looking at the speaker. In the traditional sense, when somebody would go up on stage, most of us would be looking at the speaker. But in the Zoom context, there's equal attention given to co-listeners, and people are looking at. Now, while we may not be conscious about it, our native body is very tuned into it. And so when it realizes that we are being looked at, it again goes back to the native self of being tense, alert, and a bit of stress begins to build up. So if you've noticed that if you've come out of a 2-hour Zoom meeting and you felt, well, I only probably spoke for about 10 or 15 minutes, why am I feeling so much of fatigue? It's possibly related with how our native body has reacted to that situation. So the research gives some very simple solutions, which I thought you may take away for yourself and anybody else that you'd like to pass it on to. So it just says that push the screen back a little bit. Look at all your Zoom meetings in grid format so that the eye contact is much more limited and smaller. And thus you may find yourself probably in a more relaxed state than the way you're currently addressing Zoom. So and similarly, as you go through the other parts, it's a joy to read it. And I think a few takeaways definitely for me there.
A lot of takeaways from Zoom, definitely. I hope like all of them are reading this research, because it's like someone else has done the work for them. They just need to take all the feature requests from the study. But I agree, like being on presentation mode always is something I'm not used to. I'm the one who's, looking at the screen saying, is my hair all right? I'm so busy looking at myself that I don't know whether I'm actually spending enough time looking at the speaker, and I have to tell myself, look at the speaker. Definitely guilty. But I'll then move to my favorite part. I was reading the study and I said, he talks about the increased cognitive load because of the non-verbal cues you are sending out. And I found myself doing that. For example, when you were speaking, I was doing this whole exaggerated nodding to, express that I agree. Early days, someone said, look at the camera instead of looking at the person, so that the person on the other side feels like there's an eye contact. And I was speaking to someone and I kept telling myself, look at the camera, don't avoid looking at the screen. And it literally took me off track. I didn't know what I was saying. And then I finally, I think 2-3 calls later, said, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I need my eye contact. Like, I need to look at the screen. The other person can do whatever they want. But that's the wonderful part about the study. Like, you go through it and you have these moments of epiphany, and like very simple things like switch off your self view sounds easy. And when I did that, I had like high sense of anxiety. I'm like, am I centered now? Do I have someone in the background? Like, what's happening? So it is definitely a fun experience.
Yeah. You talked about the self view, which really brings home that that's another additional pair of eyes that the body senses looking at yourself. So it again primes itself further up. These are new days with Zoom. So like how we've done across centuries, I think we'll eventually adjust to it. I think the key for everybody today is to take away that relax. I don't think give it that much of importance, but just feel relaxed and natural as much as you can. Because the more you kind of talk yourself in terms of that, I need to get my message across more clearly, and you focus on that, I think Zoom will become part of our operating system. But in these early days, I think we're definitely in need of help, and therefore this Stanford study is well in time. So worth a read, according to me.
Absolutely. For all our listeners, I will link all these studies that we're discussing today in the show notes, so you can hop over there, read them later, and then, nod your heads in an exaggerated way with us. And also, more importantly, I hope Zoom's listening somewhere and their designers are like, okay, maybe we need to knock that self-view out. But I'm actually going to move on to our second topic. So McKinsey released some kind of report which they said is what employees are saying about the future of work. Now, it has a few interesting tidbits, but the part that I was fascinated by and that caught my eye is the part about communication. I think it says very loud and clear that communication is something employees are not getting enough of. And it got me thinking, when this whole pandemic started, there were so many messages that came down within organization, and also, the whole marketing and advertising around, we are all in this together. And then as time has passed by, I don't know whether we've accommodated to the situation, but those messagings and those exaggerated empathy has suddenly died down. Organizations are now saying, this is what it is, go do it. And we've had the chance to walk the talk and actually show our employees we don't just say we care, but we care, and treat your people as adults and all of those things around it. Now, the other part is also about mental health. There's this whole huge focus on mental health of employees where we're giving free headspace subscriptions, sending care packages, and more has been done in the space than ever before. Now, the research says the biggest reason for anxiety in our employees right now is not knowing the future of work. They don't know when they're coming back to office, what's happening. I'm going to quote a stat from the article and then I'll pass it off to you, Shahid, and then you can take over and stop me from rambling. But the report says, vulnerable as a detailed vision for post-pandemic work might be to employees, 40% of them say they're yet to hear about any vision from their organizations. And another 28% say what they hear remains vague. Now, I have a feeling these numbers aren't as right, because that means 30% plus people have got clear guidance from organizations. And if that's true, then that's fantastic. But I have a feeling that isn't. Over to you.
So, this whole thing on communication, there are two ways that it is important. But I think the way organizations have set themselves up, and more so leaders have set themselves up to be the ones who will provide perfect clarity, give you the perfect direction, is not true, in the sense that this is a situation that nobody has ever dealt with. Unfortunately, leaders have traditionally set themselves up on this pedestal where they were to provide this perfect clarity. And today, when they're realizing increasingly that it's very difficult to say something that they can hold on to for the next 6 months even, they have gone into a bit of wishy-washy communication. So my recommendation and my take on this whole thing is communication remains important, but I think we need to reset some of the fundamentals of communication, which is to say, keep it real. Even when you don't have anything to communicate that we are not being able to figure out what's happening right now, but we'll get back to you. I think sometimes people just stop communicating when they have nothing to say, and that leads to even more kind of noise in people's head. So keep it real, be honest and truthful. I think in all practical terms, in events like this, you at best have a month or 2 months clarity. if that's what you have, then that's what you kind of share with people. The next part, which kind of strikes me here, is that why should you have all the answers? Why can't we co-create some of the way future will exist? So go out there, seek inputs from people. How are they seeing the world? What do they think is practical? What will work? And I think so. Communication will remain important, but I think the format, the high-handedness of the management will communicate on the X date of this month would have to change. It needs to become more real and more transparent and more participative. I think that's really where somewhere I think we'll be on the right track if we do that.
Of course, like for 20 years, organizations have been telling their people, we'll give you guidance. And then suddenly they go off and say, oh, we don't have the guidance. And I get into the mode where tell me what I need to do. I've shut my brain out. You're supposed to be the one who does the thinking for me, at least on these aspects.
Absolutely.
At some point, we need to go and say now, okay, this is not how it was. We don't know anymore. Yeah, we're literally caught in the middle of not knowing anything or not knowing enough.
Or even if you just know a little bit, to share that. And I think people, sometimes I think leaders just forget that all of us as listeners and employees are intelligent. They're getting information from so many other sources. So everybody knows and everybody can pick up when you're a sham and when you're being authentic. So the sooner the leaders and organizations learn that they just need to be present in front of people and be authentic, I think you will see the reaction from employees in a completely different order. I think that's what we should do.
So, for example, new coffee table discussions are all, is Spotify coming back to work? Twitter is allowing for remote work and so on. So if there's a whole blank on people looking at you and saying, so what is your organization doing? And you're like, I don't know.
Yeah. People should say, I'm talking. I'm. In fact, some people should say, I'm talking to the CEO these days, and that's a fresh thing. Just to say that there's technology allows direct communication, so have more direct communication.
That would actually make for a good coffee table conversation where they do AVZ organization is doing this, and then they turn around and say, what are you doing? What is your organization doing? And say, I'm in conversation with the CEO and we are currently building our strategy. How cool is that?
Right. Absolutely.
You're tuned in to the HR Bandit podcast, your one-way ticket to the latest and craziest in the world of work. In partnership with Timber Media, podcaster for India Inc. is sponsored by Adrenaline E-Systems Limited.
I'm going to take us to our last and favorite topic of the show today, and that is Shahid Khan's take on diversity. Now, I love it, Shahid, because it's different. It's got me, we've had multiple conversations on this, and I'm I didn't think that way. It's an interesting take, and it's something that our listeners definitely have to hear. So, Shahid, I'm going to let you start the conversation on this.
Okay. So, firstly, this topic will have a few different shades, but I want to say that per se the initiative around diversity and inclusiveness is the right thing for all of us in organizations to do. It is, I think, a very, very powerful initiative. But I do feel that it's not being looked at holistically. So let me just step back and kind of say that when we all hear the word diversity from our corporate hat perspective, the things we hear is about gender diversity, ethnic diversity, people with special needs. And that's what organizations have goaled themselves on, right? That we should bring in that much of mix of gender and ethnicity and color diversity in our teams. But if you look at an analogy of an onion, right? To me, that's the first peel of it, that we get diversity in terms of these popular headings. And some companies have also gone and set themselves number goals around these things. But now look at diversity as just a simple word from the dictionary. When you read diversity as a definition, it really talks about diversity of thought, diversity of thinking, diversity of ideas, diversity of personalities, diversity of beliefs, and diversity of values. Now, we as a human race is made up of all these diverse ways of looking at problems. But we're not talking about that diversity so far. And we are setting ourselves only goals as far as gender diversity and ethnic diversity. So I feel that the discussion and the programs need to be far deeper in terms of all the levels of the onion. Let me just pause it here and just talk about another area which I think is connected with this. It's to do with how organizations have been built. And so if you look at organizations of the industrial age and the post-industrial age, which is potentially about the last 120 years, organizations have continued to find new success formulas, mature with every passing decade, etc. And what do we have today as some parts of the success formula to make a good, scalable, growing organization? It is having one system, having a singular band of processes. It's about having a single set of values. It's about the big thing called one culture. Now, if you look at that, that's emerged as the secret sauce of building a growing and a big organization. But if you look at this in context of diversity, if that's a program we genuinely want to embrace, then we are questioning the very fundamental basis of this success formula, which is to do with encourage diverse thinking, encourage diverse values, have patience to listen and tolerance to take in ideas from all places. So today, while companies are adopting diversity in terms of gender mix, are they really becoming more tolerant towards ideas? Is diversity of thinking patterns coming into play? Or when things are being framed, are you looking at data-oriented personalities as much as gut-oriented people? Because I know of organizations where they love the fact that every decision has to be made from a data standpoint. But what about people who have cherished their creativity and instincts and and their gut feel on certain things? Shouldn't they also get included in the decision making? And if an organization is able to do that, that's when it's truly diverse in my definition. So I think the goal of having inclusion is good, but I think we should also embrace it in a much larger format and also go into building tolerance and acceptance of ideas. To me, all of us as leaders today, we should take that on as a challenge, because that is fundamentally rewiring how organizations have been built so far. And if as a generation we do not take that on, I think we would have done ourselves some disservice. I think the future organizations which are truly going to sustain and continue to succeed are the ones which have diversity at all levels flown into this very structure and design of the organization, and not just as a program. So that's my view. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about it, and hopefully you'll post your comments.
I think you've kind of tempered down from where you first started, so I've had some hand in convincing you to meet me halfway. But I think there's also the whole concept of funneling the problem. So, like if you look at a large problem right at the start, it kind of is dissuading. And you're like, if I break it down into small pieces, does it become easier for me to manage? And that's what we've done. We've said, okay, there is this onion, but we're going to peel it like one layer at a time. Because if we start like crushing the onion, we might just like lose the entire onion. I don't know if that analogy made sense. No. But
it does make practical sense. It's just that my submission to you is that bring diversity of thought and into the discussion also. Because if you approach it with trying to create a climate or an environment in which there is acceptance of diverse views, you will go out there as an organization seeking people of different types, be it of gender, of color, of ethnicity, of nationality, will happen. But I'm seeing that we are adopting this as a program to get the number and the numbers in, but we're not necessarily building the environment of multiplicity, but still wanting all these diverse people to come in, but still conform to a limited set of rules and limited thinking patterns. So that's where my thing is. I think approach it anyway. As long as you peel the onion and you come to the center, I'll be happy. But we need to have this in parallel mode rather than in sequential mode, in my view.
it is definitely something to think about. And I also have a discomfort when we put like targets and numbers to things, and I totally agree with you there, because I was reading, and I don't remember which report it was, but it was saying 57% XX in this country feel included, and that is up from like a 46%, and they were like saying that's great progress. Now, while I acknowledge the progress, I'm saying that in any key metrics that we have for our organizations, 57 is still a bad percentage. So we're really not patting our back on it. Like, when did 57% of people feeling included become a good number? Like, that is concerning.
Right.
We'll see where it goes from there. But I actually like I'm going to use exaggerated focus again on diversity. I think we're going in the right direction. It may not be like a straight path right to the center of the onion. It's like a whole long, winded journey. But I think what organizations are doing is just experimenting with what works to figure out like how do we actually get to the end state.
For a start, I would just say to everybody who's tuned in to actually at least start having this conversation and see what the reaction of your leaders are, or if you're the leader, what your core team members' reactions are. Because the more you kind of prepare the soil, I think your diversity will be even that much more successful. So you'll get in people of diverse backgrounds, but they will feel at home because their quote-unquote tangent view will suddenly have some place to go, rather than they realizing after getting in that they have to conform and not be themselves. So have the conversations and let Ankita and me know.
Oh, absolutely. I think you know that something's gone wrong somewhere where you actually have met all these diversity goals, and then you're sitting in a meeting room looking at everyone, maybe virtually now, and say, we all look very different, but we think absolutely alike. Like, where did we go wrong there?
Right.
Anyway, Shahid, I'm going to wrap it up here. It was great having you on the show. Any closing words?
I have in a strange way, a closing prayer. I mean, I think the last year, everybody has kind of been through something which they had never planned for. It's been tough. I want to acknowledge that it's not been easy on anyone. And I think I'd like to offer my prayers and wishes to everybody to be strong in this time. I think the two things that have kept me going is very important is to stay connected, connect up with people, though you may be in your room or any place where you're logged in from. Do pick up the phone, speak to people. I think it's a tremendous value. And the second is laugh. Have a sense of humor. One of the reasons why Ankita and I connect is to actually share a laugh, which is important just to do that. And I think these two things have helped me. So while I wish for all of you the best, hope we all come out of this stronger and better. Thanks, Ankita.
That is my wish too, Shahid. I know it's hard, but everyone's doing their best to cope. And I agree, like a sense of humor has definitely kept me going. With that, folks, on behalf of Shahid Khan and myself, Ankita, we are out.
Bye. Thank you.
You're tuned in to the HR Bandit podcast, your one-way ticket to the latest and craziest in the world of work. In partnership with Timber Media, podcaster for India Inc., is sponsored by Adrenaline E-Systems Limited.